As a party, we believe that, this makes a mockery of the public participation process, where citizens joined the committees of parliament, and the citizens were communicating a very clear message to say land expropriation without compensation. Now, if you read the statement issued by the president today, it's very clear that the expropriation can only happen after no agreement has been reached with the property owner, which means there's no land expropriation without compensation there. What you rather have, the regulations that the president has articulated in this statement, it is to say that if any government entity wants land, they need to negotiate with the property owner, they need to beg with the property owner. Only when there's no remedy or when there's no conclusion, only then do they go to expropriate land without compensation. So that is why, in our view, it makes a mockery of the public participation process, because government needs to do what the people want, not the other way around. You can't have a case whereby citizens go to a public participation process and say land expropriation without compensation, but the government or the president communicates something
Is the signing of the expropriation bill into law really going to significantly advance land reform, or does the bill merely align the country's expropriation laws with the Constitution? The President has signed the bill into law, which will make it easier for government to expropriate land with nil compensation in the public interest. But does it go far enough? And will it withstand the legal challenges threatened by several political parties? The Minister of Land Reform, Mzwanele Nyonso, joins us tonight. We'll also speak to the ANC and the MK Party about this act of law and whether it really sets a path for effective expropriation of land. Mzwanele and Mzwandile, thank you so much for making time for us tonight. Good evening.
Hi, Clement, and good evening to your viewership.
I want to start with you, Mzwanele. What difference? Mzwandile. See, this is going to happen a lot. So forgive me. When I look at you, just know that I'm referring to you, Mzwandile.
Yeah.
What difference is this bill being signed into law actually going to make in the bigger scheme of things? Is it really going to advance the expropriation of land and land reform?
Yes, it is going to do so. You will recall that we had steps towards expropriation without compensation. So this bill in the main will firstly align with the democratic constitution so that all the things that were not provided for are provided for in this particular bill. Secondly, it covers issues of public interest beyond just public purpose, because public purpose in apartheid was about bulldozing infrastructure where they needed land. Now, public interest include issues of land reform, include issues of looking at natural resources and other issues of transformation in the main. And thirdly, also there is a provision for, for a nil compensation where the state can prove that it is in the interest of South Africans. So those things were not provided for in the previous bill. So we think that this is a good start. But however, our final journey as the African National Congress has resolved in our successive conferences is to ensure that we actually change the Section 25 of the Constitution. Yeah. And we're not yet there. We're hoping that with the emergence of the parties like MK, EFF and other progressive parties, we will jointly work together on modalities so that we can go there as a second step. But
the
for
EFF
now,
offered you that support previously. They said, come with us, we'll vote with you.
They offered it for something else, not what the ANC had envisaged, so we never agreed. So it's not true.
But it was expropriation without compensation.
Yeah, but for something else, not that which the ANC was pursuing. So it was on different conditions.
Mzanele Manyi, as the MK Party, what's your position on this act of law now?
Sorry, there's nothing that this law is going to do that you could not do before without it. So it's a completely useless piece of legislation. This legislation, all it does is just for the ANC to do its rhetoric and to do all its all its statements to just fool the people. There's nothing. I mean, without this law, we're able to do a Gautrain, and the expropriation with compensation happened, which is what this law still promotes. Without this law, farms were given to black people and all of that, and farmers were compensated. Without this law, absolutely nothing is going to change. So this is just a complete waste of time. It's rhetoric. It's just to fool the people. The nub of the issue is Section 25. And within Section 25, the real issue here, which has never been dealt with to date, up until the MK Party has come up now with a private members bill, which will be tabling in this first quarter. The key issue here, I'm happy that even the previous processes did not yield anything, because had those processes won, it would have been a hollow victory. Hollow victory because there's a section there, Section 25, subsection 7 in the Constitution. That section has got a cutoff date. The cutoff date is 19 June 1913. That thing says all land that has been robbed of our people, whether it's colonialism or apartheid, must then be redistributed, restituted. That's what that thing says, but from 19 June 1913 onwards. So basically that clause in the Constitution has sanitized the land theft that happened from 1652 until 1913. It meant that if that discussion had happened, was successful, it would have been successful to the extent of dealing with issues post-1913. So in fact, it was a blessing in disguise that that process did not succeed. The bill that the MK Party will be putting on the table in this first quarter is the one that moves that date back to 1652, 6 April 1652. This is when Jan van Riebeeck first set foot here. That is what must happen, and we're going to do that without compensation. You see, the ANC today, they issue a statement, they lie to the people. In that statement, they say in the 54th conference has resolved. In that 54th conference, Mzandile was there. He's the one that made the proposal. There was option 1 and option 2. Option 1 was expropriation without compensation. He made the move. I was there next to him. He made the move at NASREC in 2017.
What were you doing in NASREC then?
No, I was in ANC.
Oh, you were still in ANC?
I was in ANC.
Hey,
We're the same party. He moved it in 2017. I'm glad that is here. And that option 1 was expropriation without compensation.
Yes.
If you go to the ANC resolutions today of 2017, you will find this thing.
Yes.
Today, that thing that they have, it's got something about nil compensation, some nonsensical
But
stuff.
he does admit that it's the first step.
No, it's not the first step. They had the opportunity. In 2018. You must remember that after taking this resolution in 2017, 2018, the ANC had the opportunity. It took the EFF, by the way, to raise this thing for it to get back on the table. Got back to the table, and in October, when they submitted the bill to amend Section 25, they had done some monkey trickery there. They've put something there called expropriation with nil compensation, which meant that the principle to compensate is there. And all of that, which is something that we wanted to deal with. It also meant that if you have a dispute about whether to compensate or not to compensate, then you must go to court. All those processes were totally unnecessary had you done what their own resolution had done. So they just keep fooling the people.
Speaking of going to court, Mzandile, in terms of this law, an expropriating authority may not expropriate property arbitrarily or for a purpose other than a public purpose or in the public interest. But this limits government, doesn't it? Because property owners could challenge you and say, how do you determine that this is public interest? And what if you guys don't agree? Because I feel like it's taking you back to that willing buyer, willing seller policy that you abandoned with the ANC because it wasn't working. Yeah.
Look, the first point I want to make is that my colleague here is actually distorting history, because the issue here is that he's debating Section 25, and this bill has has very little to do with that. It's an old act of 1975. So I think we must differentiate so that we can be together, because I'm sure in many issues we'll agree there and there in terms of the approaches and so on and so on. So what we need to be debating today is the Act of 1975 that has been repealed by a new Act of 2004, which had key features. One of those, as I mentioned earlier, was that we needed to ensure that there is alignment with the Constitution. Secondly, outside of alignment with the Constitution, the issue of public purpose has now been expanded to public interest. And then I explained that public interest include issues like land reform, including issues of transformation, amongst others, and is not touching those issues because those issues are practical. So we always knew that this as an act of, like any other acts that exist, has to be repealed by a democratic government. So where we are, I think that this act will actually assist us in a way. For instance, there is a provision there in the new act that has been signed by President Ramaphosa about compensation. It says that in instances where, for instance, a property or a land has been abandoned or for speculative reasons, the government can expropriate without compensation. It says it now in this act. So all those kind of amendments were not there in the Act of 1975. So I'm asking Comrade Jimmy to debate Mzwanele to debate that which we are about here today. So if you want another debate about the Section 25, the modalities, we remain ready, as you know, that we pushed for that resolution, and that resolution is there in the ANC, has not been neglected by the African National Congress. As I said, that our first step is to make sure that we deal with this, and then so that it can assist us to deal with certain things that are critical.
Hold on, I'll come to you. What happens, though, if you don't agree with the people who hold the rights to that property?
Look, there is mechanism, there's dispute mechanism that has been provided for, which was not there in the previous act. So we'll approach those, because remember, a constitutional democracy, we're not just going to do things as that's why the push for the amendment of the Section 25 in the whole is the second and the most important step that we must take.
You still need to negotiate with the property owner.
Look, we've got mechanism now that have been provided for in law, including going the mediation route to ensure that we can find each other as long as we can prove public interest.
Isn't this the same as the willing buyer and willing seller? You still have to sit down with people who may tell you that you're talking nonsense. Get out of here, I don't agree with you. Or if you want to even pay, they say, that's too little. That's going to take forever. And then, is it going to work?
Clement, we are repealing the law here, which was very specific in terms of, it was about apartheid, adding powers to themselves about what they can do and cannot do. So what this bill does, it reduces or it repeals exactly those provisions that were made in the past.
Clement,
so where we are going, just if you may,
sure.
So where we are going, I'm saying that what President has signed will in a way assist us to move a step further in terms of transformation, and I'm certain that it gives us even a much more way to be emboldened to move ahead and ensure that we move to implement the resolution of the African National Congress.
Yeah, there's no, I mean, he is creating an artificial separation. This expropriation bill seeks to implement Section 25.
That's even what the President's statement says that. It complements Section 25.
In fact, the Constitution says legislation must be put into place to give effect to what is happening there, which is what this thing is doing. And then for the framework, then they have to go and rely. Can you imagine this? A government of the ANC goes and takes a 1975 Apartheid Act, and they use that framework of that act to come and tweak it a little bit to make it implemented. It's the Constitution as it stands. The issue here is that there is no act that will contradict the Constitution and still be valid. The fact that that act is valid, it means it gives expression to this untransformed Constitution. The issue here is the Constitution that is not transformed. The issue here is Section 25 that must be explicit, that we want expropriation without compensation. This law to come and be here today is not doing anything new. It's exactly the willing buyer, willing seller thing, as you've correctly pointed out. absolutely nothing changes. It's just for the ANC to go and do their platitudes.
But the ANC says we believe in the rule of law. We can't go around grabbing land.
No, you don't. You don't have to. That's why we have to amend the law. I agree with that. We have to amend the law. This is why at MK we're not doing land grab. We're saying let's do this thing lawfully. Let's amend Section 25. This is why for us we think the issue of getting 2/3 majority is key, so that we can amend the Section 25, because land, nobody came from Europe with this land. They found the land here. So the expropriation without compensation must happen. The land must return back to its owners. The kings and queens of this country, that where the land was taken from, must get and take charge of how the land is administered.
How would you decide which land as the MK party from your policies you expropriate without compensation?
You see, for instance, how did we decide which minerals do we expropriate without compensation? With a stroke of a pen, we decided as a country that all minerals belong to the state. With a stroke of a pen. It's a simple exercise as that. And then we put MPRDA to monitor that process. So it was just as simple as this. Simple as that. The same thing can happen here. Use the mineral approach. Stroke of a pen, the land belongs to the state. Stroke of a pen, simple as that. And then we say, right, now land belongs to the state. We are not chasing anybody away. Land belongs to the state, then we agree leasing arrangements. Okay, we give you a 100-year lease if you are going to use this land optimally. The only thing left in the equation that must be filled in is what are the matrices that will be used to determine that we are using this land fruitfully for the benefit of the country and all of that. So nobody must just hold land, arable land, on the basis, some apartheid or colonial basis, that land which is not used profitably for the country. People that must have land, access to land, lease land, are people that can use that land for the national interest. That's what we want to do.
Yeah. Mzondile, you said this is the first step towards realizing that resolution, the 2017 ANC resolution. What's the second step?
Look, the second step, the ETC, which is an internal committee of the ANC, is working very hard actually to rework the resolution as it was pronounced, to make sure that we are then able to go out to parties who are like-minded and convince each other that we can now...
You don't even need to convince each other because they're there.
Look, I can tell you now, and I will invite you in Parliament, because when the ANC puts that law, they will be the first to grandstand. They will be telling us the resolution is not sufficient, and we can't change the resolutions of the ANC outside of conference. So the resolution speaks about land expropriation without compensation. So, and it expands on that issue. So we wouldn't want to do something that we're not mandated to do outside of the Constitution. So that's why it will be important that we work out all the modalities, and then we sit with them as different parties in Parliament and outside of Parliament as parties, to look at what are the common features of our proposition, because all of us are almost proposing the same thing. And then from there, we will then have to ensure that we follow due processes of the Constitution and ensure that we go and vote together.
So to be clear, this is not your final destination. You are willing to work with other parties to get this 2/3 support, majority in Parliament, and change the Constitution to allow for that expropriation of land.
But they still don't
That's the policy of the ANC.
They still don't talk.
And he knows about it. He was our member a few years ago.
He still doesn't say anything about this section I'm talking about, Section 25, subsection 7. The one that pushes the date back. The resolution of the ANC doesn't deal with this. This is the corner. This is what the MK party is raising. Brand new discussion to say backdate this thing to 1652. That's a new discussion, and I'm saying the bill is already almost on the table. I don't know, maybe you should ask him if they'll support this bill, because our bill is going to be clear. We're taking it to 1652, and we're doing it without compensation, and we're going to use the model of the MPRDA. So it's like it's been done before. By the way, people that live in Waterfall are living in an environment that is what the MK is saying. In Waterfall, nobody in Waterfall, an upmarket area, nobody there has got a title deed in Waterfall. I don't know if you know this. Whether it's your residential area, whether it's business, everybody's leasing. So MK party is doing, let's do a Waterfall model for the entire country. Why is this complicated?
Look, as I'm saying that in the ANC, we have a resolution, and it's a standing resolution, and we welcome any discussion from any party that is progressive, who will understand that we've got a standing resolution and will respect their own resolution. So if there is a need, we have conferences coming now, even before the end of term. If there is a need for us to adjust our resolution, as it were, and we are convinced through the engagement with different parties, I don't think that we'll have problems, because the important thing for us is that we want to do something in the interest of our people, and the state must be at the center of ensuring that we reverse what colonialism and apartheid did in South Africa.
Okay. Mzwanele, are you prepared to work with the ANC on that?
No, the question is...
If they bring a bill.
No, we're going to bring a bill.
So
the question is,
expect them to support yours.
We are much more advanced than them, in that our bill is already with the lawyers now to do what I'm talking about. And also our bill is richer than whatever they ever conceptualized. Our bill talks to that 25 subsection 7, which they don't talk to. So our bill has got more. So the rationale and the right thing to do is to deal with the bill that we have. The question that you should ask him is whether they will support the MK Party bill, which will do two things. One, expropriation without compensation unambiguously. Backdate. Two key issues. Will they support that? Will you support that?
Well, it's not a matter of putting me on the platform, because, as I said, we've got a resolution that is clear, that has been worked out. If you are indeed not grandstanding, you must come and engage the African National Congress, and we're not afraid of engaging.
Okay, that's fine. We'll do that.
And ensure that we can then find each other. So that when we go to Parliament, we shouldn't go there to grandstand. We must be resolute, and we must make sure that we protect the people of South Africa. So it's important that whatever that we do as the African National Congress, as a party that is in leading government now, we must make sure that we are responsible. Everything we do, including amending the constitution, we must be constitutional.
By the way, leading government with other parties. Some of those parties you're leading government with have actually released statements today rejecting.
It's interesting democracy. Yes. So we will work with those on this program of land expropriation. We will work with those that are defining themselves as progressive, and those who don't agree with us, who don't work with us, we will understand. But because we are not here to protect that which happened during colonialism and apartheid as the African National Congress.
All right. Mzwanele Manyi, thank you so much for making time for us. And of course, Mzwandile Masina, thanks for coming to studio.
Life of an artist, bad shot spices, glorifying drugs as a stage fright cure. You can try this just when you're about to grab your chance of staging. Excitement, you can't think out this industry, or should I say this killer dream, cause you will swear that from the start it was designed to kill artists. Bangakulwela when days are bright, as a human being on Instagram, too much pressure, unrealistic expectations. Whoever said that is the perfect is with us, wethembekile, singiza wethembekile, remedies within us, ezikhwemba sibhebhekile.